Now, two recent landmark reports on the European Union's economy paint an unforgiving picture of its vulnerabilities, suggesting the region faces the prospect of slow agony. At current productivity and demographic trends, Europe's economic output is forecast to be the same in 2050 as it is today. We now cross over live to Davos, Switzerland for continuous coverage on the ongoing World Economic Forum for a special panel discussion on this topic.
Do you think that the election of Donald Trump is such a moment? Does this wake-up call constitute sufficient pressure for Europe to act?
I respectfully think that it does. And I think that, of course, we have to act. We have to act together. And we have to play not just defense, but be forward, if I use football terminology, and making sure that we leverage the strength and the assets that we have. You like numbers, Rula, so I prepared a couple of numbers for you because, you know. So, here is one. The European Union turns out almost as many STEM graduates as the United States per million inhabitant, okay? So that's one. Today we have 3.5 million Europeans in European tech. So I think, you know, that's my point about we have the talent. Another figure for you as well. When I say we have the money, the Europeans are saving. They're saving massively. 15% of GDP is into saving. Where is the money going? Every year, 300 billion euros are invested in the United States. So that's my point about we have the talent, we have the money, we have the ideas. In areas which actually matter for the future, we file as many patents as the United States. I'm not trying to, you know, be in a race or compete with, but I'm just saying that we have a lot of assets, but we are shooting ourselves in the foot many times because we don't complete the work that we were set out to do. Look at the single market, which is a point not made by so much Mario Draghi, but by Enrico Letta. If we had a real single market, we would eliminate about 40% of equivalent custom duties amongst ourselves, the European, and about 110% custom duties on services amongst ourselves. So charity begins at home. We can do more than a decent job if we were to remove fast, some of the barriers that we have just let history, you know, laziness, bureaucracy build and stand in the way of what we have. So I'm trying to be realistic and a little optimistic.
I want to come back to the question of talent because I think there is an issue of fragmentation that is not allowing Europe to actually take as much advantage of this talent. But Minister, Germany's economic vulnerabilities are structural, reliance on an old heavy manufacturing industries and exports to China. Do you agree that the model itself needs overhaul?
Yes, I agree, and I agree also with what President Lagarde has said, both with the description of the situation, but also with pointing out that we have opportunities in Europe, also in Germany, but in Europe, and we are not using them wisely enough. One point you just mentioned is, I would say, my daily experience. We have huge numbers of new companies. Startup scene is developing fine, but when it comes to the scale-up phase, European money is lacking. It's very risk-averse, so they're running around and find money givers mostly in the US. And that means, of course, that the revenues are not going to Europe, but to the US. So they become stronger by the day. And in the end, sometimes the young companies, they're not so young anymore, are moving to the US because it's easier and the market is bigger. So this is, we are not using our powers wisely. And I'm coming back to the German situation in a moment, but also, I mean, there's a lot of debate about what the Trump election and the new government will do and how our relationship will develop. But from Germany's point, one part of the vulnerability is also an advantage. We're having a trade surplus with the US of about 60 billion. That means we are producing goods now. So this is not coming from nowhere. We have techniques, we have goods that we bring over the Atlantic and to the world. That means we have also lots of data. The German industries, the industries, two of them we have here, they have the data. We have a fine portfolio to develop our own AI systems and complexities, but we're not using it as for the talents. Well, and for Germany, you're right. You said it just in the sentence, and I hope everyone has heard it, and I hope every German politician has understood it. It's a structural crisis we're in. And I admit I've had to learn it myself because we tend to look at the short term. The election period is only 4 years, and you look on the annual figures, and then we the Germans thought that COVID-19, the economy was going down, and then we had better figures, and we are going up again. And then there was the energy crisis due to Russian aggression, and we're going down. And we kind of oversaw that this is not a short-term circular crisis, but a structural crisis. Our economy is not growing since 2018. Our growth potential is going down since 1.5 decades, and that means we have to reinvent our business model, because our business model now, plain to see for everyone, relied on two factors mainly, cheap gas from Russia or cheap fossil energy from Russia. Well, that's gone, and I guess it won't come again. And open markets. Half of our GDP growth is coming from exports. I mean, we are only 80 million Germans, a little bit more, and we are the third biggest economy in the world. How have we done it? By trading, meaning we have making full use of the advantage of a globalized world. But of course, that is now part of our vulnerability. China is pushing heavily into the markets, also in markets where we thought we have the best techniques. It's not true anymore. And they are using subsidies and are very aggressive. I think everyone is knowing what I'm talking about. And the US at least tend to close the markets. And we see this tendency everywhere. So yes, we have to do better at home, in Germany and in Europe. And doing better means... Yeah, sorry.
I'm just wondering, how do you help the German car industry?
The German car industry?
Yeah, to be more competitive. Because... Well, it's also in crisis.
But that is now a funny question, because normally I'm criticized for helping the industries too much. Okay. So when you ask the not Financial Times actually, but your sisters in mind, the German newspapers that are monitoring the economy, they are always complaining that now for semiconductors or for green steel or for batteries, we have the IPCEI projects from the European Union. So helping the car industry now means, I guess, that they have to produce cheap electric vehicles themselves. That is something we can't do. But of course, we can invent a better circumstances for the cars. I would say the best idea is using the batteries in the cars as part of the energy system. So you earn money by having an electric vehicle, and you use it as a storage capacity in the grid. This is a regulatory framework. We are on the way, but as a lot of things I have found when I became minister, a little bit behind the wave. I would guess the best way for electric vehicles is making energy cheap, electricity cheap. This is now, for me, easy to say, because now we are up to 60% renewable energy in the system, but the permitting process is beyond that, so we are on our way to 70%. So I can say we have made the energy green or climate neutral. Now we can make it cheap, and really cheap, so putting out of the energy prices all the tariffs and the grid fees that are making the prices higher. Which means, of course, we have to find or invent new ways of financing our grid infrastructure. This is now the question debated in the German election campaign.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to Germany in a second, but Belen, everything we hear from the US, well, it's only been 3 days, although it feels like quite a bit more, is deregulation, cutting taxes, a huge focus on growing the economy. There has been a problem in Europe of overregulation, hasn't there?
definitely, the issues that we have in Europe are not related to the recent elections in the US. We have been talking about European competitiveness and how do we boost European competitiveness for the last, you name it, 3 to 5 years, right? So part of the problem is overregulation, but this is not the only problem. We are falling behind on certain technologies like artificial intelligence, and this is because of big fragmentation and lack of investment. And unless we fill the gap in those areas and catch up on the market share we have lost in artificial intelligence, for example, since 2000, we risk to lose, I'm going to give some figures as well, 3 to 4 trillion of our GDP by 2040, right? And I think this is, the US is only another wake-up call to accelerate everything we said we are going to do, right? And I can tell you at the private sector, we have stepped up as much as we can. We continue to invest in Europe because we do believe that we have the opportunity to turn the ship around if we address not only the regulatory environment, which in the case of science and technology for a company like ours is very clear, very predictable, and should be completely focused on supporting innovation. We cannot, at this time of the game, start questioning regulatory data protection, for example, and shortening that when we want to create a rich growth for an industry which is generating a significant contribution to our GDP in Europe.
So there are a couple of foundation model companies in Europe, but there is also a view that LLMs are now being commoditized, and therefore Europe needs to think of other areas or what you can build over LLMs. In what areas do you think Europe could be competitive if you look at if you segment the tech industry a bit more?
Look, I think we have tremendous talent, great industrial tissue, and extremely competent academic institution, great scientists. So I think that
it's also fragmented, isn't it?
Yeah,
the university sector itself
too fragmented. Definitely, we lack, as Madame Lagarde was mentioning before, the opportunity to invest on certain technologies that are at an early stage, unless we have this capital market unions that is now being promised by the President of the Commission. So we have to act on this to continue to develop our biotechnology innovation in Europe, but this is possible, right? We just need to make it happen.
And there are European leaders in some sectors, which brings me to Nicholas, because you've got a better story to tell. In fact, your challenge right now is in China, isn't it?
Well, it's true that I'm lucky to run a company that's the worldwide leader, and that is European. That was born, so indeed it has a market cap above 100 million, but it is 115-year-old, so it's true that it's not a recent startup.
Cherry-picking data.
Yeah, well,
No, but he's right.
but it's good.
No, I'm saying I was cherry-picking data.
But, it's true that the beauty industry is probably the only sector, if you take the top 7 companies in the world, 5 are European. And something we should be proud of. And it's a demonstration that, indeed, as President Lagarde says, we have the talents, we have the ideas, and when we do invest in innovation, we can win. My mother was one of the leaders of the European Space Agency, and I was raised in the development of Ariane. I saw the Airbus adventure, and Europe also brought mRNA vaccines. So we can do things. The only thing is that we have to be innovators rather than regulators. And if I build on President Lagarde's metaphor about football, I think Team Europe has to play together, and that's not the case, not always the case. And indeed, it has to defend its play on its strength, and we have a lot of strong companies, and indeed I think they should feel supported rather than hindered in their innovation capacity, and then should choose a few sectors we can lead the way. Just to build on what Belen said, bioengineering, biotechnologies are clearly an area where we can combine innovation, sustainability, and that, a company like L'Oréal, which has pledged to eliminate petrochemicals from its formulas, would definitely be a very good customer of this technology. So I think it is possible, but as you said, it's time to wake up, and it's time to shift the focus of the Commission from creating rules to incentivizing innovation.
Do you think? I know that the intention is there now when you listen to the president of the Commission, but there are so many layers of regulation. And Belen, as you said, are you going to go back and simplify GDPR? I'm just thinking. Are there specific areas that should be focused on? For example, a lot of companies tell me that climate and environmental regulations, that the burden is huge on companies. Is that something that the Commission should be focused on? Because just saying also, let's not regulate as much, I'm not sure that, part of Brussels' raison d'etre is regulation. We love that Europe is a standard and regulation setter. Any of you can comment on this.
Yeah, I can comment on CSRD, for example, which is one of the topics that have created a revolution in terms of reporting and writing reports of hundreds and hundreds of pages, who I doubt anyone is going to read. Sorry to be so blunt, but the question is this bringing any value, right? I can tell you, in our company we have deployed more than 50 people to be able to report on time, and I only think of those SMEs, right, that have to report exactly the same as any big company, right? So, but this is just an example, right? We shouldn't take regulation as the only example, because to me, creating a real united Europe is as important as regulations. We need to ask the countries. We have our own problems in Germany. The Vice Chancellor mentioned where we are, but above all, if there is anything that is going to move the needle, right, is acting with sense of urgency and with great connectivity between the Brussels level and the country level.
No, I think, when I heard President von der Leyen yesterday, she mentioned a 28th regime, she mentioned cutting red tape. There's been lots of talk about this omnibus that would reassess some of the regulations or reporting, and I think it's a very important commitment which Europe has to deliver upon, because it's true that reporting is a topic, but a number of regulations have to be reassessed. I can give you one example, which is something that's a worry of mine, which is called the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, which is something that says, which I'm totally in line with, that the polluter has to pay for the depollution of water.
Yes.
100% agree with that. By some sort of magic, the conclusion is that two sectors are responsible for 100% of the pollution: pharmaceuticals and cosmetics.
Et voilà.
And that when we analyze the data from Europe, we assess that beauty represents less than 1% of the pollutants found in water, but we would have to pay for 26%. And I'm not commenting on all the other sectors, which, by the way, are led by American or non-European companies, detergents, food, drinks, whatever, that are excluded from this. and yet we would have to pay for 26%. So typically that's an example where you have a winning industry that exports 26 billion euros outside of Europe, but we would have to pay as the sole culprits of something we agree with, but that has not scientifically been based. So that's an example of the absurdities, and I don't want to waste everybody's time here, but I have 2, 3, 4 examples. Alcohol may be banned because it's carcinogenic if we drink it, but it may be banned for cosmetics or hydroalcoholic gels that were used during the COVID, but it would remain in alcoholic drinks because they are exempted from the chemicals and cosmetics regulation. So it's like a maze of incredible
I feel like the representative
regulations.
of the government here wants to come in.
You want to start?
You start.
Well, first of all, I agree that I would say everything that has to be decided should be decided fast and not long. It takes too long. And I can give you examples all over the place how these, in some cases, ridiculous measures to not to give one advantage to one country lead to 4 years of decision making until one steel company or whatever gets any form of state subsidies. While they are doing on the American side tax credits, and that's just if you invest and then you got the money back. That's very, very easy. But still, I would connect this discussion to the Draghi report and to the day after the day of Trump's inauguration speech. So yes, we have to do better, we have to be faster, and I would completely agree with the Draghi report. You know, there was a tendency in Germany not to read it because it was written by an Italian, and in the end, the Italian is always asking for more money. So nobody has to read it. But every German should have read it, and not every German, but every decision maker, because it's really, really blunt, and in a way it's saying that, and this is now the connection to what I'm trying to say, is that we have, in the end, also a democracy problem if we are not acting better and faster and more decisive. Because we are now complaining that Elon Musk's technique is maybe destroying our way of communication, and maybe TikTok is doing harm to the communication of our kids. But where's our own answer? I mean, we can regulate their technique. Where's the German or the European Google or Amazon? It's not there. It's not there. And this is why this is so important, that we now invent more of the new techniques in Europe and in Germany, because if we are not doing it, or Germany, forget Germany, it's only because I'm in the election campaign in Germany that I'm always saying Germany. So in Europe, I'm completely for Team Europe, yeah? And I think that Germany has to do more for the Team Europe. But if the attraction of the authoritarian governments, both on the Chinese side and very different on the American side, but in a way authoritarian, both of them, is becoming bigger and bigger, then we're losing the European way of life. And therefore, I would say deregulation and making things faster and cutting red tape, all right, and I can give you lots of examples out of the energy sector where we can move if we have to. If we're having the sense of urgency, Europe has proven again and again that it can be fast and strong. Yes, but my point is that we should not mix this up with the, I call it now, for lack of better words, the value discussion. Because I think that climate action is necessary, and drill means burn planet burn. I'm not agreeing with the aim of this. And if we're saying individual rights or minority rights should be forgotten, I'm out. So being faster means to defend the European way of life, our democracy, our social economy. So, but this means defending, not only saying we have to regulate their technique, we have to do it here in Europe, and we have to do it now. We don't have much time. It's now the next 3 or 4 years. So,
of course, you've touched on something that's very relevant, and that is the politics. We have Germany facing an election, and in France. how do I describe the current situation?
Yes.
Complicated. It's complicated. And so, the two sort of engines of Europe are very busy right now,
that's a
occupied
real
with
big
themselves.
problem. Therefore, when the German government broke down 10 weeks ago, this was a very unpopular government, and I became also unpopular to the German people in this unpopular government. So, in a way, everyone was fine with, now we are having an election campaign, but it felt not right that way, because now again also Germany and France and Austria and Belgium are looking inside themselves. So Europe is discussing with themselves while the others are going forward. They are not waiting for us. So and this all the political power is now in Germany going into the political internal debate, not helping Europe. The day has only 24 hours also for Friedrich Merz, Olaf Scholz and me, and what we are doing is standing on stages and convincing the people that we are the right ones, not going to Brussels and cutting red tape and not doing governmental work so much. And not the same is true for France, if we are blunt, and but Austria is a mess, I would say. So, but
you can keep going if you want.
Yes. So you see, but I think the election of Donald Trump has to make a change. It's up to us if we understand and read the science rightly. If we are saying, oh well, this goes over and we fall back to our own laziness, then I can say maybe the German laziness, we're doing it all wrong. That is one last sentence. Sorry, because I read it in Applebaum's book, and I think this is a remarkable sentence. Democracies tend to think that they are unbeatable because we have the higher moral ground. We think because we are standing for freedom and for individual rights, we will ever win this race about the political value systems. And that's not true. We tend to have a blind spot in our own system. And the blind spot must not be that we can achieve the next level of economic welfare by doing it the old way. It's not possible, and I hope everyone has understood it now.
I'm going to come to the audience in 1 minute, but President Lagarde, last year I remember moderating a panel where at the end you said, Capital Markets Union, this is the year. Where are we?
I was talking about 25, right?
You were talking about 24.
Well, I don't want to take any credit for anything. What matters to me is that there is now, I think, a really broad consensus across political parties, across countries, with the exception of 2 or 3 that have their vested interest and their little turf that they're trying to protect, to agree that we need a capital market union, to agree that we have to manage more money inside Europe and make sure that the money travels to the VCs, the funds, and the equity political will. If we know what the focuses should be under the deliverables, then we need to activate them and not tell them, provide another draft regulation for you, Commissioner, when he comes to the next meeting. No, provide this to make it effective. And by the way, remove all the inconsistency, the layers, the additional buffers and all of that. I'm not talking financial regulations here for the sake of argument, but it has to be cleaned up. In CSRD that you were referring to, we have the US standard. We have the generally accepted standard by the accounting community. We have EFRAG that is putting something else on the top of it. And everybody has the same intention, good intentions that many would agree with, but it's all over the place.
Yep.
Mehri Khan, I work for the Times in London. I've been to Davos for the last couple of years where on panels like this, European policymakers have been talking about the need to make the state bigger, to subsidize green industries, to do more fiscal spending to support growth. And I'm struck this year that it's absolutely the opposite. The state needs to get smaller, we need to get out of the way of businesses, and we need to deregulate, which would suggest that Europe takes its economic advice mainly from just seeing what the US is doing and trying to do a version of it itself. But I also bring it up because we assumed that we needed a better growth model to deal with the fact that it's not just growth, but the equitable or the lack of distribution of growth that was the problem. And I want to ask a question to the panel, whether we think that deregulating our labour markets, our product markets, liberalising the single market, etc., will deliver the equitable growth that voters in Europe ask for? Because I guess empiricals over the last couple of years would suggest that trickle-down doesn't necessarily answer that problem.
Yeah, it has been industrial policy for the past few years, hasn't it?
Do you mind if I correct one thing? Because you've used extensively the word deregulation, deregulation, deregulations. I think what is in the mind of many of those who are looking at efficiency gains and improved productivity is simplifications. So to the point made by Vice Chancellor, we're not going to give up the protection of data and data privacy, which is so highly valued in Europe. We couldn't do that because we would lose the European population that wants to see its data protected. But we do not need to have a cottage cheese industry in order to produce the acceptable, appropriate documentation that is, as you said earlier on, 100 pages that will eventually be read by artificial intelligence with a couple of people saying, okay, pass. I think the words matter. I don't think that we are heading, that's not what I'm seeing, at least from my vantage point. We're not moving to a world of deregulation across the board, but we are certainly looking at significant simplification and focusing on actually the purpose of what we are trying to do.
There is, though, a question as to whether if, the Biden administration, if Kamala Harris had won, whether, more industrial policy would have changed the debate here as well. It's an interesting question to ponder, isn't it? The impact of the US on the way that we think in Europe.
And of removing IRA fundings for the future.
Yep.
Well, that is, if I can add,
Yep.
There are European companies who went to the US because of the IRA.
Yeah.
And one of the first acts of Trump was to cut down an offshore wind farm. That's also a chance from that point of view for an own technique made in Europe. But that means, of course, we have to not shy away, and we have to be blunt, and we have to be fast, and we have to give the right financial incentives, and we have to use the private money and to activate it. But if they don't want to build the techniques of the futures, we are ready.
I want you all to actually think of opportunity, because when in a few minutes when we end this, I would like to end on a positive note. Let's take another question. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Gira Ryerson from the Global Shapers of the WEF, and representing the young voices. And we talk a lot about simplification, and Lagarde also said, for starters, we need Europe to go in one direction. I'm curious to hear your perspectives on where will this leadership come from in Europe? Because currently every country is occupied by themselves.
Well, I think, let me speak about this, because I think that in current times, leadership in any place will not come in this new age of intelligence from a single technology. I believe leadership will come from those people who understand how technologies are converging, right, and are able to generate business that will be disrupting existing models and eventually creating new opportunities. And this is what I believe, entering the era of bioconvergence, this is where I believe Europe actually can lead. And once again, at the private sector, and I say this with pride but also with humility, we are a company that are extremely well placed to deal with this bioconvergence. Digital plus biology, right? Flexibilizing completely our smart manufacturing, our manufacturing operations, automating everything, and making our operations more predictable, combining the expertise that we have in different sectors, right? In our life science sector, in our bioelectronics, biopharma sector. So I don't believe that we need to pick and choose one single topic. We need to be focused. We need to be investing R&D dollars on where we can win. And I believe Europe is very well positioned in health technology, right? And digital technology, even if we are lacking in some countries the infrastructure that is necessary. But it's all about the way we actually make technologies converge that will give us some opportunities to lead.
Let me take another couple of questions, and then we'll come back to the panel, and you can answer them together. Go ahead.
I'm Stu Eisenstadt. I was U.S. Ambassador to the European Union for a good part of the Clinton administration. I came away from Brussels with 2 lessons, and neither one's been addressed. The first is that while you have a terrific education system, the young people who come out of it do not take the same concept of risk as Americans do. If you start a company in Europe and you fail, it's a black mark on you forever. The goal of young people is to go with a large company and stay there. So part of it is simply a risk mentality. Second, we did a study for the Atlantic Council, which I co-chaired with former Commissioner Emmanuel Barroso, and we found that one crucial item was that 80%.
Riveting panel discussion there from the ongoing World Economic Forum in Davos, identifying Europe's economic vulnerabilities and unlocking its potential. Lots more ahead there. Well, that's it on the Global Business Report for now, but stay tuned to Arise News. From all of us, many thanks for your company. I'm Abby Olawi.